Today is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Professor Melissa Terras, who is a professor of digital cultural heritage at University of Edinburgh and one of the most influential figures in DH internationally. And her work has shaped how we think about digital cultural heritage, digital scholarship, and the relationship between humanities research and technology. And for UCLDH, well, Professor Terras is part of our foundations. So she was one of the founders of the center and also the DH program at UCL. And many of us continue to benefit from the community, the teaching, the projects, the infrastructure that she established here, and including myself. So today, the lecture is titled, "The More Things Change, Digital Humanities in a Tumultuous World." And it is a perfect topic for a field that has always lived with change, but also ask critical questions about the change. So who shapes it, who benefits from it, and what kind of communities that we want to build. So it is therefore a real honor for us to bring Professor Terras back to UCL, and please join me in giving a very warm round of applause for Melissa Terras.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute delight to be here. For those of you who don't know, I worked at UCL for 15 years, and the person who chaired my hiring committee was Susan Hawkey. So Susan Hawkey, a very influential individual in the history of digital humanities. She was at Oxford for a long time and then came to UCL where she was head of department in information studies. And she hired me into my first academic job. So she actually sent me a note a couple of days ago saying, "I apologise for not being able to come, but it's wonderful to have that invite and to come back and to be part of that trajectory and that history of digital humanities here." It's also really weird to come back. I was thinking, what could I possibly say to people about digital humanities, and what could I possibly say about the worth and value of digital humanities now? And so I started from thinking, I'm going to be standing here saying something. When was the last time I was standing here saying something? It was in 2014. It was my inaugural lecture when I'd just been made a professor. So here I was explaining that, the university changes and evolves. Here I was explaining that what goes up must come down, and digital humanities at the time was at the height of the hype curve and was going to eventually go down and we would get to a steady state, but we have to navigate these kind of rises and falls and hype. And the time before that I was standing here, it was for the launch of UCLDH in 2010. So this is actually right here. And the person who was launching DH was James Murdoch. I'm an absolute baby there, look at me. I found out the day before this photo was taken that I was pregnant with twins, so I was sick as a dog that night. But here we are with the Murdochs in town, and it was a real circus. We had Sky News. It was live broadcast on Sky News. There was satellite dishes on the roof. This is me telling a billionaire what to do. The relationship with the Murdochs broke down a couple of weeks later when the phone hacking scandal broke. And UCL, universities like to talk to billionaires about things, and UCL gradually retreated. So, but it was a really interesting time to see how current digital humanities was and how much the news wanted to hear about people studying digital things, and there was a real sense that we were at the centre of something that was about to happen, or the centre of a discussion of things that were about to happen. A lot has changed since then. So if we go back to 2010, what has changed in the world since 2010? And what has changed in the digital world? Now, if you don't want to cry into your pillow tonight, you can cover your ears and cover your eyes for like a minute as I just run through some of these things. So let's start with the Scottish independence referendum, which might not mean anything to you, but to people, I see another Scot in the audience, for people who are Scottish and were down in London, meant a huge deal. Didn't go Scotland's way, but the Brexit vote, it was a yes to Brexit. Then we had the pandemic. Then we had a break in the longest history of peace across Europe in history with the start of war. Then we have not one, but two of this regime, and the vileness and the hatred which has been spewed by adults who really should know better, and none of them know better. We've had not two people, but all of that shower, and we've had a rolling back of rights from some of the most persecuted individuals in our society. And all of this is underpinned by, we can't call it climate change anymore, it is a climate crisis where we are going to see mass displacement of people, change in institutions, change in cultures, change in the way that we all live. How do we respond to that? Well, technology has responded to that. Since 2010, technology has changed massively since we launched UCL Centre for Digital Humanities. I got my first smartphone in 2010. Tablets came out 2009 as well. We're now always connected, 4G, 5G. Everything is in the cloud, though we don't own anything anymore. Everything is streamed. Everything is given to us now in very short bite sizes. We're losing our power to concentrate on things. We don't own software. It's software as a service. We rent it. My new fridge is connected to the internet. I don't quite know why, but it's important that we have an Internet of Things. We've seen a massive growth in social media. Digital humanities itself massively profited from social media as a way for the disparate community to connect. But over the last year or two, we've seen a real drop-off of social media and a real breaking of that. And I'm coming to understand that Twitter was an exception. It was the exception rather than the rule. The way we were all hanging out in Twitter in 2010, 2011, 2012, where it was a warm place where we could all get on and all think about a better future, that was an exception to what digital media and digital communication is. And then we've had AI, particularly Gen AI. Now, I've been working, I'll come to this in a minute, but I've been working in AI for 30 years. So all of a sudden, AI is, boom, in your face. We should be in a place now in the higher education sector to be able to talk about all of the above and to talk about all of these things. But in the past 3 years, there's been 30,000 jobs lost in the UK higher education sector. We do not have a government that gives a shit about universities. So we are supposed to be the people who are commenting on all this stuff and actually thinking about all this stuff, but we have a Labour government pandering to the right wing to not even notice that they are dismantling expertise in this country. And so what have we got to do to talk about all this and to defend ourselves? It's not a happy time. And if you're in information studies, and if you believe in information and you believe in the creation of knowledge, we are seeing that dismantled by the way that AI is being monetized. It's a very specific use of AI, a very specific business model that is ingesting the world's knowledge and wanting to sell intelligence back to us for money. And that is disrupting the internet, which took 25, 30 years to build a human-hewn internet of lovely information and lovely knowledge, and that has been rapidly dismantled over the past year. When I look back to 2010, and we were a bit naive, we kind of loved technology. It was so cool. Everything that we were doing was about, egalitarianism, and it was going to change the world in lots of good ways. And we didn't really understand as well a lot of the systemic biases which were underlying the technologies and the systems and the databases we were using. We know better now. We know better that the technologies we use and the information we're basing things on have sucked in all the societal biases, and we have to navigate those. But again, that's a really difficult thing to do. So in 2014, when I stood here and talked about the future of digital humanities, it was a kind of positive tale. And I find myself here, I can't do the maths, 12 years later, going, oh my goodness, what is the point of digital humanities? What is the point of digital humanities right now? I've just been given an MBE for digital humanities. What's the point of it? And that, my friends, is what this lecture is going to be about. So, I have given you a lengthy preamble about the state of the world and how everything has gone tits up. I am now going to talk about my background and why I get to have an opinion about all this and why you should listen to me. And I'm going to talk about the ennui about digital humanities and how it's viewed as a kind of pointless, nice, pretty thing. But actually, underpinning everything we do, there are some values about how we talk about capital, about how we talk about skills, about how we talk about worth, which are worth fighting for because they are countering all those bad things which I have just listed. I'm going to talk about how we need to evidence our contribution to society, and I'm going to stress the different approaches that we are taking to technology and the importance in teaching criticism of technology and the importance in thinking that you can build a different future using technology and not just bowing to what we are being told is our future by the AI giants. And the world has changed. Has digital humanities? That's what I want to talk about. So who am I? Most of you know me, but who am I and where did I come from? I did art history and English literature at the University of Glasgow. And we had, as my master's dissertation, someone called Seamus Ross, a professor there, he argued that people should be able to hand their dissertations in as a website because the statutes didn't say you couldn't. So we handed in our dissertations as a website for the first time. I learned how to program the web. And that was when the light bulb went off, bing, I should be working in technology. Right? I love old things, absolutely love old things, love collections, love museums, love libraries, but I'm really good at the technology. And it was clear to me that there would be a place of the past in the digital present, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Everyone kept telling me that wasn't a thing, and you couldn't have a career in that. I just was like, sit down, here I go, this is what I'm going to do. I keep this online because why not? April 1997 was the invention of the sidebar. It was very trendy then. So I was right in it, and web design, we were on email lists where people would send around an email saying, there's a new website, Boots the Chemist has got a new website. And we would all be looking at this new world which was sprouting up online. It was a very exciting time. I got some funding from the Scottish Government to do a master's conversion in computing science. So I crossed over the road in Glasgow, went to the computing science department, and my MSc dissertation a year later was working with Kelvingrove Museum, where I made a virtual reality tomb that showed where some of the ancient Egyptian exhibits that they had came from. And at the time, this was the highest resolution virtual model of a tomb which had been made. That is nearly 30 years old now, right? So we were working with kind of technology programmed by hand, you could make it in 2 minutes now, but then it literally took like 6 months of programming to make that. I then went to Oxford to do a PhD in engineering. They were looking for people who had classics and computing. I think I was the only person to reply to that advert. Never mind. I went to engineering, doing my PhD there, and we were working on tablets from Hadrian's Wall, which were very damaged and deteriorated. And my PhD is actually for the maths, how you compare images to linguistic data. So you're comparing apples to pears and how you have to balance that. It's really interesting for those of us that have been working in things like handwriting recognition technology for 30 years. Like, now is the moment where it's become mainstream, but there's been a long history of people plugging away at that. I joined UCL in 2003, and I look back on that time as a huge time of experimentation. 2003 to, I left in 2017, but the first 7 or 8 years of my time here, a lot of experimentation with tech, a lot of projects that we didn't know if they would work, but we tried them anyway. LinkSphere was doing linked open data before it was even invented. I was working with Adam Gibson and the people in the digitization suite that we set up on heritage science, so taking digital humanities into the sciences. I was working on social media and people like Steve Gray from CASA on the Panopticon. We put a webcam on Jeremy Bentham's head to show the world what Jeremy Bentham saw from his box. And that was a £300 project that was in so many news outlets. It just captured that moment of social media and the playfulness. And we had students coming to do dances in front of the box and moving about on the squares, and it became quite a big hit. So a lot of experimenting with social media, with tech, with systems, and a general playfulness. And a sense here that if you had a good idea and a little bit of resource and you wanted to roll out your sleeves, you were allowed to do stuff and play. And it was a really rich time. And from that came UCL Centre for Digital Humanities, which I co-founded, and then in the last 3 years before I left UCL was the director of, and it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And then it was time to leave UCL. Oh, sorry, I'll talk about the two main big projects that we did before I leave UCL. So the two big projects, and they're still going today, that I was involved with, the two most famous ones, Transcribe Bentham, and Philip where's Philip? Where is he? There he is. Philip and Tim, who I worked with, so under the aegis of Philip Schofield and working with Tim Coster as well. We had this idea that if we digitised images of Jeremy Bentham's manuscripts and put them online, we might be able to get volunteers to help read them. Now that today sounds like crowdsourcing, sure, why not? But we were the first project to do that. We were the first project to give people something to do that was actually hard, rather than just tell us where there's a typo or something like that. We were on the front page of the New York Times and everything. It was quite a thing. And that's still going today. We think it will be finished this year, maybe next. No, soon. Soon. It's still going today. We still have volunteers. It'll be finished soon. So there's tens of thousands of folios of Bentham and correspondence between him and other people. And we've had volunteers making really high quality transcripts of what they say. The thing is, coming from someone who's got an AI background, if you have images of text, high resolution images of text, and you have lots of high quality transcripts of text, it turns out that that's an ideal data set to train AI. And we were approached by a consortium who are putting in some bids for some European funding to Transcriptorium, and we got 8 years worth or 7.5 years worth of EU funding to try and solve that problem. How can you make a generic enough handwriting recognition technology model to be able to read any handwriting, any old handwriting? And Jeremy Bentham's handwriting was the first model that seeded all of this. And it also helped the project survive. It helped pay for the platform to be online. These two projects are still going. Both of them are still going, and I'm still delighted to be in touch with them. They both have been huge successes. I'll come back to the Read Co-op and Transcribers later. And along the way, I wrote some books, which is what I like to do, including Defining Digital Humanities, which is now the text which most digital humanities courses in the world have as a set text. It's also been translated into Chinese and Russian, so all the dictatorships can now read Digital Humanities and see what we think about it. It's a bestseller in China as well. I'm super famous in China. It's really weird when I go there. But yeah, so it's a sense of kind of capturing something in a bottle and capturing what we were doing through these. And then it was time for me to leave. Why would someone leave UCL? Lots of reasons, lots of life reasons. My commute was killing me, and I wanted to be able to walk to work. My parents aren't getting any younger. I wanted to be within half an hour drive of them. I've got 3 kids. You get free university in Scotland. And I have to say the high schools in Edinburgh are amazing. So lots of reasons. And I have to be honest, and I will be honest, I didn't think about whether I should say this or not, but the priorities at UCL changed. When we set up UCLDH, we had a huge amount of support from management, including talking to these very rich people to say whether or not they were going to sponsor professorships at UCL. And we had a huge amount of goodwill. We built up a huge amount of goodwill, specifically from the Bentham project and the stuff we were doing with Transcribe Bentham. But then we got a new set of management in, and it was explained to me that digital humanities was not a priority anymore. And overnight, our entire budget got cut. Edinburgh, at the time, investing £350 million into the digital humanities. And so I went there. And I've had a really interesting time. I was brought on to help renovate this old hospital, this Grade A listed hospital, which is not even across the road from the main square at Edinburgh, George Square. It's across a path. It was the old city hospital, which had languished for 20 years. The university bought it and converted it into a new centre for data science for the arts, humanities, and social sciences, spending £350 million. And I was part of the management team of that. So that was a huge step up for me, but also these were the plans when I took the job, and it opened a couple of years ago. So it's open to the whole city. It's interesting to me that my children now go there with their friends to revise for their exams. So, it's a building which is open and is functioning for the whole city as well. And when I was there, I set up a new centre, not as public-facing as UCLDH. It was very much servicing the University of Edinburgh. Last semester, we taught over 800 people, masters, PhD students and staff in data-led methods. We run over 80 different training courses a semester. We use our PhD students to deliver them. So if anyone comes to us and goes, I really need to know about X, we will put, not the X Twitter, but anything. We will put together a small training course and then we'll advertise it and get 10 people that want to take it. So we're very agile. We also help people write grants. I can point to at least 10 projects that have brought in multi-million-pound bids because we've sat down with them and helped them and supported them. So that is what I have done at Edinburgh. And then Transcribus had to go from a university project, which was a consortium across Europe, helping people read old things with handwriting for free. We ran out of money, and once you've solved a computational problem, you can't get any grant money anymore because it's not research. But we had all these libraries and archives around the world using this, digitizing their stuff, putting them onto our servers, and then spitting out transcripts of what documents actually say. So we had to grow up a bit, and we had to become a legal entity. And in 2019, we launched the Transcribus as a legal entity, as a trading entity, where people had to pay a small amount of money to use the service, and it's still going today. Most technology companies fail within their first 5 years, like 95% of them fail. We're going to be 7 years old in about 2 years' time. So we're still going. And I will come back to Transcribus later. And along the way, I also wrote some books because that's what I like to do. The biggest project that I took on when I joined Edinburgh was actually a step away from digital humanities. And it was part of the creative industries funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So not just thinking about libraries, archives, museums, but thinking about advertising and dance and theatre and moving kind of up a bit and thinking about digital across all of these things. And we got £10 million funding. We were one of 9 hubs across the UK, and it was our job to provide funding and development opportunities. Not just within the university, but anyone in our locale, so anyone in the city. So we were working citywide across people. We had a large dedicated team. We had 10 full-time members of staff, and our job was to build a community. So I took everything that I learned from digital humanities into this slightly different role, working with what we call the creative industries. There's a whole list of numbers here, but the point I just want to make here is about the scale of what we accomplished in creative informatics. We helped 47 companies get set up. This is a time of pandemic, a time of austerity. We helped create 445 new jobs. We got an economist in at the end of the programme to do a proper analysis, and they showed that we had taken that £10 million of investment and we'd grown it to £78.5 million within the Edinburgh economy over a 5-year period. It was absolutely amazing to be walking that talk for digital humanities in a completely different environment and completely different, talking about things. But then, as is the case with most grants, when they come to an end, you can't get money to do this stuff. This stuff doesn't stand up on its own. And we couldn't get any further funding, and all the team went on to do different things. But I learned a lot from that. At the moment, I'm now working with a lot of the EU projects. We got our first EU grant, working with the Cultural Heritage Cloud, so I feel like I'm going back into digital humanities. I'm leading data ethics for Infinity, which is feeding into the European Cultural Cloud. I'm also the UK representative for the EU Cultural Cloud, so I've got a lot of European travel coming up, and it's nice to be coming back into the DH fold. But I have learned a lot along the way, and that is now what I want to talk about these kind of things. So in 2014, I stood here and said that digital humanities was really at the peak of inflated expectations about what it was going to deliver. And that means at some point you have to go into the trough of disillusionment, and people go, yeah, but you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z, and now you actually haven't delivered that. But eventually it gets to the plateau of productivity, and it just becomes normal. I think I've kind of missed that bit where everyone's going, what's the point of digital humanities? Because all over the world, there are now digital humanities courses. All over the UK, there are digital humanities courses. There are loads of, it's an established discipline. There are people who talk about it, and there are people that, in 2010, there's a lot of arguments as digital humanities, is it even a thing, you know? But now we can show that there are projects, there are people, there are students, and it's something that people want to do. We are training people from the humanities disciplines to think critically about technology, and that is wanted by both the students and both employers, which is wonderful to see. I think I'm still a little bit in here, though. I'm a little bit thinking like, you know, the world is, yeah, so why are we doing these things? What difference does it make? And the perception of digital humanities to those outside of the community is all that we do is build digital editions. All that we do is build websites of old things and allow people to explore them. And maybe that's why when the budget was cut here for digital humanities, maybe that's what the new senior management thought, that's all that we do. And it is something that we teach. It's the entry-level point to digital humanities to a lot of people, that we would teach them how to make a digital edition, and we would teach them how to put something online and how to pull it apart. So there is some truth in that. But at the same time, I'm going to argue now that we can look at it a completely different way. And actually, what we're doing is we're teaching people the necessary critical skills to build different technology. And there really is a place in the world. So I don't think it's fair when people think that digital editions is all that DH does. I also think it's wonderful that universities should be a place where if people want to build digital editions, there should be somewhere in universities that people should do it. I also think there's a place for pure humanities, and people should be able to, in this day and age, study the pure humanities without digital. I'm not one of these people that thinks digital is everything. But there is a perception of DH that all we do is teach people how to put old things online. And this is where we have to start talking about the value and worth of digital humanities. Now, I'm aware that when I say value and worth, that you will mostly immediately think of money. And that is because we are living in late-stage capitalist times where everything is reduced to how much money something is worth. At the moment, I work in an art school. There are people who specialize in valuation studies. There's a whole field. And they talk about how you value things. And there are 7 different ways you value things. One of them is money. But the rest of them, well-being, being a good ancestor, being a good custodian. You know, there are various different ways that you can specialize in or identify the social worth of something. But we are in a place, and we're in a higher education place just now, that people are only caring about money. And when you ask what the return on investment is for digital humanities, we cannot put a financial thing on that because we're not about making money with what we're doing. And that puts us on the back foot. And return on investment, the amount of time when I was working in the creative industries, that's the only thing that our funders are interested in, is return on investment. The amount of paperwork we had to fill out about proving return on investment. And the digital humanities community isn't using that term. And it isn't talking about money. It isn't talking about what we have done with the money that has been given to us. The reason I'm interested in this, I think digital humanities is a beautiful space because we are not prioritizing the monetary value of what we do. We are prioritizing all the other stuff. And we are kicking tech about to go, what would happen if I used it to study language or linguistics or the past or collections? We're not trying to make money from it. That is the lowest on the mixing desk of different types of values. That's the lowest thing. We're really not interested. We're interested in creating wealth, financial wealth. We're happy to hold out our hand and get grant funding for our activities. And that also means that it's hard to sustain our activities when they finish because the grant money runs out. But it's a really unique space. And having gone to a lot of investment conferences over the last 7 or 8 years, and a lot of creative industries conferences, it's so nice to come back into the DH community where no one's worrying about return on investment as if making money is the only thing which is worth value just now. I went to the Tracy Emin exhibition this morning, and I was walking back across the embankment thinking about this. And I realised that the reason return on investment grates me is because it prioritises those who have resource in the first place. It's only worth things if you've got money and you can give that money to someone else and you can make more money and profit back to someone else. And this goes against a lot of what I believe in, and we'll see that when I come to talk about transcribers. So, the creative industries though are really important, and digital humanities are part of the creative industries. This is the kind of sentence which people say about the creative industries all the time. The UK government estimates, so the UK government itself estimates that creative industries generated £126 billion in gross value added to the economy, employed 2.4 million people in 2022. The creative industries employs 1 in 15 people in Scotland. 1 in 15 people. It is the second biggest sector in the UK economy after the service economy. Within the service economy, fintech sits in there too. It's a huge sector, and yet this current government isn't supporting that. It isn't supporting galleries, libraries, archives, museums. It isn't supporting theatres. It isn't supporting any of the places that we might engage with them as digital humanities people, right? So should we be using this terminology? Should we be learning the worth of digital humanities so that we can ask for more money to do the kind of things we do? It's a kind of catch-22 because I don't want us to kind of lose the specialness of what we actually do, not worrying about making money for people. But unless we start to talk to the people that are giving out grants and learning in the moment what the policymakers are deciding on at a time which is still a time of austerity, we're not going to get the funding to do the type of infrastructural work that we need to do across galleries, libraries, archives, museums, and then the people that want to actually use the stuff. So it's a balance. We've got to find that. I do think that one of the values that we have is in our diverse skill set. When we have students who come in, they generally bring their humanities backgrounds, learning to challenge power, learning to challenge voices, learning to challenge arguments, learning to challenge in a way that other people haven't had that training, and then they're taught digital skills which they can then bring to the digital environment. It's a very rich skill set. And in my time in the creative industries over the last 5 years, I've been sitting in rooms with, I won't mention which companies, but the big companies that you'd all pay subscriptions to on your telly. And we've been sitting there and they've been talking about the new technologies they're going to roll out. And I've been putting my hand up and going, what happens when the Nazis get this technology? And they have all laughed. And then I have asked again, what happens when the Nazis get this technology? Because any of the things that they were talking about, being able to make video on the fly that you didn't know if it was real or not, and it looked so real that you couldn't tell, that this, anything that they were building and helping the creative industries could actually be used for ill. And I will tell you now that the people wanting to make money out of this stuff are not having the same conversations about tech as we are having in the classrooms in digital humanities. It's really important that we are teaching people how to be critical about all this stuff. But we haven't done anything to show our value or to show our worth. And I made this point 2 years ago. I gave a keynote at one of the digital humanities conferences at DH Congress, and I kind of accused everyone in the room, like, why haven't we done a survey of all the graduates in digital humanities in the UK? Why haven't we asked them where they've gone to? And so working with Jin, we did that. We then reached out to all the different programs across the UK and got them to send out a survey to ask, once you've studied digital humanities for a year, what do you go on and do? And how has digital humanities benefited you? And we are going to present this in September at the next DH Congress. We had 130 people replied. A lot of people replied who are already working in academia. And there's probably some bias in that, right? Because it isn't everybody. It's like 130 out of maybe 2,000 people that study digital humanities. But there's a lot of people working in technology software. There's a lot of people working in galleries, libraries. There's a lot of people working in publishing and media and digital marketing and finance. So we're putting people into these jobs and into these roles. That's a success for our field. And we asked them as well if what we taught them had helped them in these roles. And the people who'd done digital humanities a while ago were still saying that it's had a lot of relevance to the digital environment that they were now working in. A lot of relevance. But the enduring value of digital humanities was this critical thinking, the adaptability and the confidence in trying out new technologies, and these translational skills, the ability to put together teams. If you want to see more about this, we are going to be publishing that paper after the DH Congress. But there's lots of future work that could be done here to articulate our worth and value so that when senior management come along and go, oh, all you do is make digital editions, you can actually prove. And one of the mistakes I made when I was director of UCLDH, we didn't have the time to compile an annual report about all the wonderful things we had done. So when they came for us and they asked for the evidence, we didn't have it. And I learned that. And so now in Edinburgh, we publish a lovely glossy report every year, and we get senior management coming in. What's the point of this? Boom, there we are. We can show who we are and what we've been doing. Top tip if you're ever running a centre, especially an interdisciplinary one. I do also think, though, that what we're teaching and what we're experimenting in with digital humanities means that we can do sustainability differently to the way that generative AI companies are behaving. And we can build technologies differently. And we can have different business models. And there are a lot of people exploring that, including Transcribus. So when Transcribus was a research project, it looked like this. This is Wilpie, and Wilpie is our mascot because the system that we built was based on librarians and technologists and archivists, and it was putting together all this different technology, so it was like the Wilpertinger all put together with its antlers and its wings and its rabbits. We had to grow up, and we had to become a trading entity and a brand, and we had to go through that, and we had to actually start moving away from the university. We are now no longer associated with any university. We're a legal entity on our own. We had to buy our own servers. We had to make sure that we owned our own data. We are a full tech stack cooperative. We own everything. The data, the servers, we own every single thing that we can have for our systems to run. And it was the leader of the last grant, Günter Mühlberger's idea to set this up, not as a company or a charity, but to set it up as a cooperative. In fact, in the original grant application that he wrote back in 2016, he had said, we're going to set this up as a cooperative. It's going to be co-owned by the libraries and archives. It's going to be co-owned by the community. We can't sell this infrastructure to Google or Facebook because there are so many co-owners and they would all have to agree. But this also means we haven't taken any external investment money, so we don't have to worry about return on investment. There's no one to pay back. We own the whole thing. And it means that we have cooperative governance, where there's over 270 members now who cooperatively own the AI technology, where you can put in images of old writing, it will spit out accurate transcriptions, but it will also, we'll have a host of other AI tools that we're building or have built around that too. We're now getting a lot of attention for this, not just in library and archive world, but the tech industry is looking for other governance models for AI. What would it mean to run AI which is ethical, which is not extractive? There's this theory that you could have cooperative AI. And we're like, well, we've been doing it for 7 years. The librarians and archivists got there first. The digital humanities people got there first. And it's been hugely successful. We won the Horizon Europe Prize for Impact in 2020, and ever since then we've grown from strength to strength. We now cover over 100 different languages at 98% accuracy. We have 400 different models which are community owned and published, other people can use them. We have transcribed over 200 million images of old documents. That is about 4 or 5 times what the UCL library books hold of images of stuff. So it's getting to be a volume of material which is starting to change how people can search history, because if you can search through handwritten documents, that is where the women are. That is where other minorities are. It's a different set of history that people can now study because the libraries and archives have sorted out this infrastructure of how you get your images transcribed and then put back into library systems so people can search for them. We also have an API that people can bolt on if they want to build their own technology. We have 5 or 6 other businesses which are using our API to start off their own. We are fully GDPR compliant, and we are using the term now, we are an EU sovereign infrastructure. This is becoming much more important. Nothing from our tech belongs to America. We own the whole lot. It's a server in Innsbruck, in Austria, halfway up a mountain that runs on green technology. So we're doing it as environmentally friendly as we can as well. And it is co-owned by leading institutions worldwide, including the British Library, including the Rijksmuseum. Like, people are, they're up for it. These major institutions are up for co-owning and looking after an infrastructure together, which is a walled garden away from some of the worst things of the modern technology environment. I'm not the only person that does this. I have to make it absolutely clear that I'm only one of 7 members who are on the board. I'm one of the 3 original founders, but I don't work on this full time, and there are a whole bunch of people who do. So we now employ 30 people full time. We have members all over the world. So this is an international conglomerate of different libraries and archives who are coming together to support this technology. And we do think about it as a walled garden. Now, this is completely different to thinking about open science. We cannot publish the underlying model or the underlying data. It is about 27 gigabytes at the moment. The only people that could take that and use it are Facebook and Meta. And if we published our model, we would be out of business like that. But we own our model. It's a walled garden. If you want to come and join us, you can join us. If you want to come and co-create, you can co-create. But we own that space, and it's a community garden that we are running together. This kind of, some people have a real issue with this for open science and open publishing. But let's be realistic. We have to build the infrastructures that we look after ourselves if we want to control them. And we have to make sure we find a way that we can allow them to be sustainable, to raise enough money to keep the lights on. And if you make a profit, then we can choose, and we do choose, to give free access to PhD students and for people from the global south who couldn't otherwise afford to get access to these technologies. So there's choices we can make as a consortium with what to do if there's a profit. If you want to read more about Transcribus, I wrote a 15,000-word essay about this. I'll put up the QR code. We can go and get any of the links. And you could argue I'm using an outlier here. I'm using the one hugely successful infrastructure which has come out from digital humanities to argue a point about how digital humanities can have success, which is different. But we're not the only people or group of people that are thinking about different business models in digital humanities. And this is where I'm going to start talking about other people's work. So how has digital humanities changed? I think this ownership and realizing we have to build our own technologies, we have to take responsibility for what we're building, and we have to secure it, and we have to look after it with sovereign data and sovereign infrastructure. We have to work together as a team. We've always worked together as a team in Transcribus, but digital humanities, it's so important to work together in these bigger teams to put together these infrastructures which are shared between different organizations and teams and people. Gone are the days where one person in their basement can come up with an infrastructure which is going to completely fly. We need to be working together and thinking big. And more digital humanities is responding to social issues and social crisis. Some people are calling that the mobilized humanities. So if you haven't looked at Torn Apart, Los Separados, which comes out of Colombia, they've started last time Trump was in power and still going now, to map the territory and infrastructure of ICE across America, to show Los Separados it was about where parents were being separated from their children. A bunch of librarians, a bunch of digital humanities people got together. We're like, we can map this and we can give people the information they need, and so the lawyers can then mobilize that. And it was the skill set that they had taught in digital humanities allowed that bunch of volunteers to come together to do that very important work, which underpinned a lot of legal challenges to what's happening in America. A group of 1,500 volunteers came together just after the Ukrainian war started for the Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online project. One of the first things within a war, one of the first things that the enemy tries to do is to destroy the libraries and archives. Because if you destroy the records of a people, those people never existed. So I was part of the, oh my goodness, what do we do? And there was 4 or 5 people who were organizing it. And they very quickly, over a weekend, sorted out a way that anyone with tech skills in DH could start scraping the data from libraries and archives and digitizing it and putting it in safe spaces, not to take it away from Ukrainians, but to make sure it was safe. And we have a few safe havens set up of this data, a few which are offline, so it can't be hacked. And we are now actively working with Ukrainian libraries to get things digitized while they can, and to get that information into a safe place. There's other initiatives working with Palestinians, working in Iraq, just now in Iran and Iraq, on the same principle that the libraries and archives will be getting destroyed, have been destroyed. What digital data can we get out of there? And this is the type of way we need to be thinking as digital humanities, as librarians, about what do we do when this wars, mass displacement of people, how can our skill set help, and how can we start to build infrastructures which can help humans flourishing? There are also more projects experimenting with different business models. So Programming Historian, which I'm looking for the people behind the Programming Historian, there we are, so Adam Crimple and James Baker. You know, that's set up as a charity. It's set up as a charity to deliver training to people. Again, finding a different model of sustainability which doesn't depend on grants, but it washes its own face, we would say, covers its own bills in slightly different ways to keep a central infrastructure alive, which is really important, because if you just use grant money, the grant money comes to an end, and then things get shut down. But they're not the only people doing this. DeepKeep comes out of the Flickr.org association. So George Oates is setting up a new thing, which she just launched it on LinkedIn today, actually. And it's thinking about how we do this distributed sharing of archives, of things that are important, so that if a node gets knocked out, that the data will survive. And thinking about the data lifeboat, and in Flickr they built a data lifeboat, how you package up collections, wrap them up with their metadata, get them out of Dodge and given to another trusted source. And we need to start thinking about decentralized sharing of data as our bigger infrastructures start crumbling. And more projects are experimenting with business models which are not-for-profit as well. So the wonderful Digital Scholar in America is a not-for-profit, and they make infrastructures. It's historians and librarians who are making the infrastructure which underpins research. So Omeka, a content management system, or Zotero to look after your citations. Again, this is a company that's been set up independently and is trying to operate not in a way which all those people that want return on investment want to do. Set something up, make it successful, sell it out to Google and make £1 million. No, we're not into that. We're into how we sustain infrastructure, how we look after it for a long time. And the Digital Scholars team have done wonderful work here. Perseus Digital Library is another example of a not-for-profit trying to sustain things for the long term and looking after cultural heritage for the long term. And more digital humanities students want to engage with things which are happening right now. I think accusing us all of only making digital editions and putting up old things online, that's not what we're actually doing. This is a list of some of my PhD students and the topics that they're working on just now. How AI is being collected by libraries, or what should libraries do about AI? how we roll out handwritten text recognition in libraries and how institutionally they have to change with that. Ash has just finished her PhD and graduates next week on the legacies of enslavement in our information environment, looking at the hidden history of slavery in encyclopedias, because they didn't say slaves, they just said, you know, trading sugar and molasses and that kind of stuff, and how that seeps into our modern day information environment. Christy's looking at inclusion of 3D museum exhibition spaces and linguistic inclusion. Naomi, who was here earlier but had to nip off, her PhD is about how one slight change in the UK's copyright laws after Brexit has completely decimated sharing 20th century content online in Britain. And she's a very specific change in a law, and she has demonstrated how some Whitehall civil servants signed a bit of paper which means the British Library had to delete 20th century content. These are all topics which, they're not abstract, they're responding to the moment that we're in now. And any digital humanities person I know is actively responding to these changes in their information environment. And they're not just messing around with old documents for fun. They're asking questions of now. They're asking questions which are important to our society. And then we have a whole bunch of people thinking about climate action and what we can do to train people up about how better to use digital, considering its environmental footprint, which is, again, is completely the opposite of generative AI, who just are quite lazy with their compute, actually, and just think you can build bigger and bigger data centers and not actually make your code more efficient. If you look at some of the biggest books in digital humanities over the last year or two, we have books, these are all from pure digital humanists, big people in our field. Data Feminism, Data by Design. Rupika Rasam's Data Empire is about to come out and is getting rave reviews, us looking at the power and structures around data. Matt Kirschenbaum's got a book coming out next year, which is about text and how generative AI has messed with text on the internet. And Miriam Posner has written a book, Learning the Software of Supply Chains, so looking at the Panama and Suez Canal and all the things that come through the software which actually governs that, and actually interrogating it from a digital humanities point of view to look at the power, to look at who's the winners and who are the losers. These aren't nothing compared to what's happening now in the world. This is right on the money about questioning our current digital environment and questioning what we want to do. And all of this reminds me I really need to start my next monograph, and I know what it's going to be about. But when we look back to what Susan Hockey and her colleagues set up back in the 1970s, it wasn't called digital humanities then. It was called literary and linguistic computing. And the association was the Association for Literary and Linguistic Computing, which changed in 2013 to the European Association of Digital Humanities. When we look back, I think digital humanities has changed in the past 25, 30 years that I've been operating in it. There was a focus on literary text. There was a focus on linguistics. But I see us now moving to using the tools to look at literary linguistic text to ask these bigger questions of the technological change now. Our ambitions are bigger. Our ambitions are, well, the problems of the world are bigger, and our ambitions as digital humanists have changed to be able to interrogate those. So I am aware that I've kind of posited digital humanities here as the resistance. I'm not sure that we're that organised, but I think there is a sense that what we are doing is very different to the prevailing winds that are coming out of Silicon Valley about technology. And that is precious, and that is something we need to support, questioning what is going on around us and making sure that we teach and train people with those skills so they can go into the workplace and make technology differently. So, just to finish up, I think we need to support the near future of digital humanities. Further work, of course, is always needed. It's just a shame just now in UK higher education, most of us are stretched so thin that we don't have the capacity to respond to a lot of these things. This may be deliberate. However, we need to find the mechanisms by which we can still keep pushing against what's happening from industry. We do need a renewed community building in digital humanities. A lot of our communities are fractured with the collapse of Twitter, with the collapse of some of the main mailing lists. But we need to kind of make sure that we're all communicating together. We need to set out our agendas and think about how we provide evidence of what we do, what the values behind what we're doing are, and also the skill sets that we have and the skill sets that we teach. Because we have a necessary place in this capitalist tech world, and we are demonstrating that other tech values are possible, and we are showing that you can still build tech that has data sovereignty. And we need to keep experimenting. We need to keep challenging these status quos, and we need to keep building a better technological future. And I do think, as Jin said, that DH is always changing, and for DH to be DH, it always needs to keep changing. These are some half-baked thoughts. I haven't thought all of this through. I will be starting to write up some of this stuff. As ever, if there's anyone out there going, hey, why aren't you talking about this and you fancy doing something together? We should write something together. I don't have any time and you don't have any time either. But I think it's important to keep having these conversations. So thank you very much for listening to me. It's a delight to be back here and good to see you all. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for Professor Terras' really powerful, disruptive, and also inspiring talk. And now we will give the time to the audience to ask any questions. First one.
Thank you, Melissa. Amazing as always, and very heartwarming to get this kind of introduction. Although people are not always very courageous to put things in a political perspective. Thank you for doing that. And I cannot, help myself but to bring a kind of a political question. I think it is an already known problem. More than 10 years ago or so, web neutrality was a thing. And you have highlighted very well that web was the accelerator to many of the things that we have witnessed. And my question is how you see the future of web neutrality, given the AI proliferation or given the Starlinks that are happening out there. Will then finally we're going to have a kind of a web neutrality, which is an empty letter?
Yeah, I think I'm such an engineer at heart, and it also goes back to infrastructure and choosing where you're putting things. And one of the biggest things that we've been hoodwinked by is that only American technology is the technology which is worth doing anything on. And there is a new resurgence across the EU about data sovereignty and web sovereignty. And Lidl, the supermarket, it didn't want to be using Microsoft infrastructures or Amazon infrastructures anymore. So Lidl is coming to the EU rescue about building different data centers and different structures and kind of by accident providing that alternative. But thinking about where we park our data, thinking about where it goes online, thinking about how you can own it, thinking about how you look after it, and then thinking about how you make sure that it isn't destroyed or taken down, and the security aspects of building websites just now. We didn't even think about web security back in the 1990s. It wasn't even a discussion. But now, if you're running anything like Transcribus or running some multi-million euro thing, the attacks are real. And the attacks are, touch wood, you've got to really think about these things. So I think it's a change in mindset from the web is a great place where we're all hanging out and it's all very warm, which is where we were in the mid-2000s and to 2010. Like it was it's a battle now. It's a battle, and to think about it like that and making sure that you take digital preservation seriously and making sure that if things get taken down, you can get it back up again. Choosing where your servers are, knowing what the legal infrastructure is that you're putting your servers are. We have to be much more educated. That doesn't mean to say that it's ever going to be a place that is ever neutral. I think the whole thing's become political. But we have to get better educated, and we're better to learn that than on a digital humanities programme and thinking about these issues. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that's actually answered your question, but it is about thinking about technology is not this kind of, hey, it's cool and nice and fluffy and it'll take, you know, no, it's very changed times.
Okay, move on to the next question.
Thank you. Hi, Melissa. I'm Karina from the University of Brighton. I want to ask you back when you were talking about the creative industries, and I lead a project that is funded by the HRC, which straddles between the heritage and the creative industries at UK in the project. And I was looking at the policies around culture and creative industries as the European Union, European Commission defines it, but we don't have a similar definition within the UK.
No.
And sometimes it falls between the kind of culture sector, which is the public investment, and the creative industry, which is this kind of, you know, games and film. I wanted to get your sense whether we want to see the glam, but my project is around intangible heritage, so for instance, the craft sector, whether you want to see this as an industry and what we might win and what we might lose by doing that, because we must not be naive, right? Infrastructures and investment require sometimes of an economic thinking, right? So I just wanted to get your thoughts around that. Thank you.
Well, it was a real surprise to me to kind of learn that people in Whitehall were always looking at galleries and libraries and museums as a money-making thing. And, you know, the big discussion about whether libraries and museums should start charging in the UK, which comes up every couple of years. And there was an economic analysis done a couple of years ago, though, which I was kind of involved in. I was asked to speak to the chief economist about that, and I just ranted at him for an hour about how awful it was that the only value you could see in libraries and museums was the cash. But that is all they care about right now. So the point is then, if it would help for us to be included in a policy, that might be useful for us because we might get some money. But if we can't express the value of that, then that wouldn't happen. And we need to have this. I don't think we have good policy engagement in digital humanities, is what I'm trying to say. We don't have that policy engagement. We weren't talking to the people that make the policy that then decide where the money goes. And it's better to be included, even if the reporting on that, it's arduous. Honestly, the monthly reports about return on investment, pages and pages and pages and pages showing that they gave you, I don't know, £100,000 that month, and you had to show that you brought in more, like every single month. It was like really hard work. So I don't know if we want to get there, but at the same time, if that's the only way you're getting money in the current climate, we have to be part of the conversation. And I don't really know what we need to do to have a better policy engagement about the digital side of kind of culture or intangible heritage, or because there's all these stats that show every £1 that you spend on culture and creativity means the local economy grows by like £3.23 or something like that. It's the figures have gone just now. It's not exact, but it's something like that. Like if you build a museum in a place which is deprived and you provide a space where people can hang out and have their knitting groups and have their like community groups, and there's economic regeneration. We know that. We've known that for years. And that's the kind of conversations they want to have about regeneration, about culture, and how beneficial. There was a study published last week, I'm ranting now, but there was a study published last week that like going to an art gallery or museum was as good for you as going to the gym. I don't know if you saw that. And that interested me because I think my friend, you're laughing, David, it's just bullshit. Yeah. It's interesting to me that that's how they're trying to explain it to people. They're trying to show something and to show the value and worth to stop the money getting cut. And if we want to be in these conversations, I think we have to do policy a bit better. And I'm not sure we have the right bridge to that policy world just now. And there's just a new culture heritage secretary in Scotland. I've not met them yet. So they've just been appointed over the past week. So I have not actually met that person yet. But, I now sit on various Scottish government boards, as well as DCMS and DCET. So I'm in those conversations trying to bang the table and say, come on, especially for the kind of glam sector. But we need better policy engagement. And I'm not sure we've got it for DH or for anything in the digital sector. Does that answer a question? little bit of a rant.
Okay, thank you. Next question, anyone? Oh, we got one there.
Hi.
Really, think you're amazing talk, and I'm an Edinburgh graduate. I've taken some classes in EFI as well.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm really inspired by what your Oxford Data Culture Society does. And my question is that, because you mentioned about policy engagement, and I think you're is doing very good in this current stage, especially facing the AI war between China and America. But I noticed, because my research is about gamers' interaction with AI chatbots,
Right.
and I noticed that, because there is a new policy in China just announced about like saying that like we should control the anthropomorphic practice, and we should control human use that, like we should reduce addiction, something like that. And I've noticed that there is misunderstanding, and people also lack of understanding of the policy making. People are not satisfied with the policy. They think their digital practice is interrupted by the policy. So alongside policy engagement, policy making, what do you think that, like, what we should do better for making people better understand the policy making?
So policy making is one thing. Information literacy is a completely different thing. And I think, I haven't talked about information literacy much today because I only had 50 minutes. But technology is changing so rapidly. The way that it gets sold to us is like when you go and buy a new car or something, or a new computer. They use all these words that don't make any sense, like to bamboozle you. And the way that AI is getting sold to us, the way that the tools it's supposed to make us confused. So we think that we have to just buy into this thing and not be able to actually build any tech ourselves. And so that kind of thing, I would say, was an information literacy problem, like teaching people enough about technology so they understand where they can question it and where they have any agency. And I would say that's one of the things which has changed most since I started programming the internet in 1995, is the level of agency that people have when you encounter a computer. You used to be completely in control of everything, and now it's reduced and then reduced and reduced to like what someone who designs an interface or a gaming interface like wants you to be able to do. And so that it's a question of people being able to grasp the technology and to keep questioning it. But information literacy is a huge thing, and how we actually get the resources to train and teach people information literacy so they can actively start questioning these policies. At the same time, we have a whole bunch of politicians who are not literate at all about this stuff and are willing to listen to people in the tech industry bending their ear and bamboozling them. Keir Starmer and his love of generative AI, for example, so there is a real question about information literacy, I think, and I think that's what you're describing, is a question about information literacy, which is not so much the policy stuff, it's about how it's being rolled out and the agency that people have. Does that make sense?
Okay, time for one last question. I can see people raising your hand first.
You can go as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa. So I'm Liz Jones. I'm over in civil engineering. And we were Twitter buddies, I think, back in 2010.
Yeah.
And I've just been reflecting on that time a lot recently. And do you think we've ruined social media for ourselves? Are we ever going to get back to just blogging and Twittering and things like that?
I don't know if we ruined social media for ourselves. I think there was a small proportion of people who were on social media back then, and they tended to be people that were interested in technology and were a bit left-wing. And then when all the reply guys started coming online, I think that, here comes everybody. I've had an interesting experience with that. I went to the British Museum yesterday just before it shut, and I took a picture of my favourite horse's head, which is one of the Parthenon marbles and one of the Elgin marbles, and I put, how beautiful it is, and I said, but it really belongs in Greece, and I had all these reply guys going, nobody cares about a horse's head, you should be caring about the Elgin marbles, and I'm like, this is literally one of the Elgin marbles. I've literally posted a picture of an Elgin marble, and you're telling me that I shouldn't care about it, and it was just like, hundreds of replies from kind of, I don't know if they're bots or whatever, but it's just that you can't post anything without that feeling of attack. And I don't know, maybe there's lots of people in the audience who didn't know what it was like to be on Twitter in 2010, where you're literally talking to Stephen Fry and Neil Gaiman before he got cancelled. And everybody's equal and you're sharing things. And we thought it was ephemeral and we didn't realise that, we could go to jail for tweets. Some people did. But it was such a beautiful time. And it was particularly a beautiful time for me. I was going to mention it. I said that I was pregnant with twins at the time when that picture was taken. I hurt my back and I was in a wheelchair for a long time and I couldn't leave the house. But I had social media. And for 6 months when I couldn't leave the house and I had 2 screaming babies and a toddler, I could talk to people at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was absolutely amazing. It was a lovely time. And I look back on that kind of 2010 to 2012. It was like me doing another master's degree. The amount I learned about feminism and politics, and people were just having these discussions, right? But I think it was a blip. It wasn't that we ruined it, it's that it got ruined, and then especially when it got taken over, and I have my theories about why it was taken over in the way it was taken over, to destroy anyone being able to organise the kind of uprisings which were happening on this technology. And I miss it, and I grieved it for a long time. I did actually grieve, once you've experienced something so joyous, and it was joyous, I did grieve it. I don't think we'll go back to the blogosphere because we all know it's going to get scraped and fed into AI. And I do feel a complete polluting of the digital communication environment by which we could all just hang out. And it does make me sad, but that means that you have to find your communities, you have to find your collectives, you have to be able to trust people, you have to actually go and find your birds of a feather and organise hanging out with them. And I think that's where we are, and it is building things like Transcribus. And we have a Slack channel, which is the walled garden, where 270 people are allowed in, and people talk about all sorts on that. But that is the walled garden that you have to pay your membership fee to be part of. And I think that's what I'm seeing, more and more people building these smaller communities of birds of a feather. And I think if you do find people that are birds of a feather, it's worth you setting up these small groups, small chats, because, all of this, I think, is designed to keep us on our own and to keep us isolated. And the psychology of the shrinking everything to 2-minute clips and stuff is to keep us on our own, isolated and being like that. But our brains are still the same as when every night we're supposed to be sitting around a campfire with a group of people looking at the stars and talking about how our day went. And we need to find ways in this modern society that we can build that, even if it is digital. Sorry, it's a bit hippie-ish, but I do think that it was a wonderful time, and I have a lot of fond memories of social media at that time, and it's just gone. It's just gone. Yeah. I did speak to Stephen Fry once, though. Hey, that was good. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a sad question to wrapping up. So let's thank Melissa Terras again for your talk, and we later on, thank you everyone for coming here despite the weather and also the tube strike. So it's not end yet, so we have a drink reception at the ground floor. And then let's do some networking and drink some wine, and we celebrate the 16th anniversary of UCLDH. Let's give a final round of applause to Melissa Terras.